Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fantasy Football X Factor podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Lamarco. Today we're going to be diving into the Miami Dolphins. This is actually the coaching changes segment. I'm going to be going through all the coaching changes for 2019. What does it mean? First off, with the Miami Dolphins, one thing I want to really kind of hit home with here is that, not only are they going to be going through a whole new coaching scheme, but they're also bringing in new quarterbacks. And it's really tough for an offense to, hit the ground running when you have a new quarterback, but it's also difficult if you have a new offensive coordinator, and now you're adding both elements. So the Miami Dolphins are going to be a very interesting and tough situation to kind of invest your fantasy stock in this year. Obviously, over the last few years, Devontae Parker's been a disappointment. Kenyon Drake has been kind of a disappointment under Adam Gase. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what Chad O'Shea can bring from New England as the new OC for the Miami Dolphins. Really, let's talk about Chad O'Shea. And Chad O'Shea has been with the New England Patriots for 10 seasons, since 2009. Before that, he was with the Minnesota Vikings for a few years under Darrell Bevell, with Brett Favre was quarterbacking there and running the West Coast scheme. And also before that, he got his first time in coaching in the NFL under Al Saunders and the Air Coryell back in Kansas City. But his over the last 10 years, he's been under Bill Belichick, so it's probably right to assume that he's going to be bringing over the Erhardt-Perkins scheme. And if you guys listened to me from last year, I kind of talked about this with the Indianapolis Colts and Frank Wright, how they're bringing the Erhardt-Perkins scheme to Indianapolis. And what does that actually mean? The Erhardt-Perkins scheme is actually one of the most quarterback-friendly offenses in football. Very simple kind of playbook in the sense you can use multiple route combinations based on personnel. So, as you saw with the New England Patriots, everybody always thought they're reinventing themselves, but they really weren't. Essentially, the reason why they were able to go from the two tight end look with Aaron Hernandez and with Gronk early on in Gronk's career to change over to the more throwing more to running backs or using their slot receivers, it was because the offense is predicated on the quarterback's tendencies. So really, it's going to be a good thing to see. It's going to be tough to predict what's going to happen because we don't even know who the quarterback's going to be. Now, from a fantasy standpoint, we would love Ryan Fitzpatrick to be the quarterback. And I think Ryan Fitzpatrick, being from Harvard, being a veteran quarterback, could thrive in a scheme like this. But the problem is it makes no sense for the Dolphins to do that. They should see what Josh Rosen has to offer. But, that's just kind of what we have to look at. So with the Miami Dolphins situation, there's going to be value here. And really where we're going to start to look from the quarterback spot is there's going to be probably moments where Ryan Fitzpatrick, if he is the starting quarterback, could be on the streaming radar because the Miami Dolphins do have some talent at the skill positions with Kenyon Drake and Kalen Ballage with, some little more unknown like Mike Gesicki, the tight end they drafted last year. Devontae Parker, I'll tell you right now, has been the most hands-off player I've had over the last few years. I actually saw the Miami Dolphins training camp last year. Not impressed with Devontae Parker's work ethic at all. He did not spend any extra time in Miami with Ryan Tannehill trying to run extra routes. That was Kenny Stills and Danny Amendola. So I never was really high on Devontae Parker, but I digress. Kenny Stills, of course. And then Albert Wilson's coming back from the injury, and he was looking explosive last season. So especially because we have seen the Patriots offense feature a slot receiver, it's kind of exciting to see what Albert Wilson could do. Now, keep in mind the one thing I did say with the Erhardt-Perkins scheme that's going to be run by Chad O'Shea, it's on the quarterback. Essentially, what their preference is and how they target players, they're going to that's going to be the fun part about training camp and preseason. We'll see if Ryan Fitzpatrick can hold off Josh Rosen or vice versa. We're going to kind of get an idea of who they're targeting. Right now, Ryan Fitzpatrick is running with the ones and getting most of the reps. And the thing is, Albert Wilson's out with an injury, so he's getting a lot of time playing with guys like Mike Gesicki and Devontae Parker, Kenny Stills. And once the pads come on, it's going to be interesting to see how this all translates. But things to watch for training camp-wise is this. The one thing I will say is the development of Mike Gesicki is going to really impact Kenyon Drake's draft stock, and I'll tell you why. So based on last year, there's something that you need that's very important. Typically, teams don't heavily target the tight end and the running back. It's either one or the other. I know it's very few cases in the NFL today do they have a dominant tight end and a dominant running back in the passing game. So, that being said, Mike Gesicki was a non-factor last season. And if the Perkins scheme, it allows the quarterback to kind of pick and choose who he's going to target because of the way the system works. So, if Mike Gesicki does not make that step forward and, the game doesn't slow down for him and he's not becoming a prevalent pass-catching tight end, of course, they brought in Dwayne Allen, who's familiar with Chad O'Shea's scheme because he was in New England, but Dwayne Allen hasn't been a real factor in the passing game in a few years and wasn't even utilized when Gronk was out. So, I really feel like if Mike Gesicki does not start getting if we don't start hearing any camp reports of him building a rapport with either Rosen or Fitzpatrick, Kenyon Drake's draft stock will rise because he will start seeing more of a utilization. We have seen with guys like James White last year, even Melvin Gordon in San Diego because Ken Wisenhunt runs an Perkins scheme. We have seen dominant pass-catching backs being utilized. So I think that if we can keep our ears to the ground and kind of listen for reports, we can kind of get an understanding of what direction this offense is going to go in. If guys like Mike Gesicki don't step up, if Albert Wilson is not on the field early in camp, and if he doesn't get back for preseason, it's going to be interesting to see how that transition happens. So, running backs. Obviously, we talked a little bit about that with Kenyon Drake and Kalen Ballage being involved because the Patriots use a lot of multi-back systems. And the good thing is this, I will say, when the Patriots offense, now keep in mind, they are run by Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, the efficiency is through the roof. I'm not going to compare the Dolphins' new system with Chad O'Shea and Ryan Fitzpatrick to that, but that being said, we have seen in the past when two running backs, not three, are being utilized by the Pats, both can have a role in fantasy. So, that being said, Kenyon Drake has the ability in the passing game to really be a huge factor in fantasy this year as a solid RB2. But Kalen Ballage could become more of a factor if they start utilizing more of emphasize more of the run game, like we saw a lot with the Perkins scheme in New England. Sony Michel in only 13 games only had over 200 carries. Melvin Gordon in the Perkins scheme last season in 12 games had almost 200 carries. Nick Chubb with last season that the Cleveland Browns were in an Perkins scheme. Nick Chubb had almost 200 carries and he wasn't even the starter the first couple weeks. So the running backs do get heavy carry counts. Perkins schemes do run through the running game. They are a run first scheme. So I really feel like that if the Miami organization now with this turnover, there's a real opportunity for Kenyon Drake to reassert himself as a true feature back in the sense of getting more carries. But if they don't think he is that guy, Kalen Ballage could see about 10 to 12 carries a game because of this system. So it's something to monitor throughout the game. There's a lot of moving parts heading into training camp for the Dolphins. Moving on to the wide receivers, listen. Ryan Fitzpatrick, there was a report, a thing done by Pro Football Focus that Ryan Fitzpatrick, since I think it was 2009, is the most targets to the slot. And listen, I get it. Pro Football Focus, they brought that up. That's great. But the problem is that's very skewed to his time when he was with Stevie Johnson in Buffalo and Eric Decker and with New York Jets. Last season, he did not target the slot at a high rate at all. Adam Humphries was more of a Jameis Winston guy than he was. You would see Ryan Fitzpatrick throwing downfield more to Sean Jackson and Mike Evans, and O.J. Howard was even more involved downfield. He wasn't targeting Adam Humphries at a high level. So there is an opportunity for a number one receiver to be from anywhere in this offense. It's really what Ryan Fitzpatrick latches onto. Albert Wilson's injury does put him at a disadvantage, and it puts guys like Kenny Stills, for example, once again, who could be a great late-round flyer as a number one option in this offense, as a low-end wide receiver 3, because of the fact that there isn't a lot of proven weapons or healthy weapons at this time. So I think the best thing right now is to take that wait-and-see approach. If you're heading into drafts, probably in July, early August, before we get better understanding, you got to make sure, if you're going to look at one of these guys, this scheme does allow anyone, and I mean anyone, to emerge. There isn't a feature, like for example, the Kyle Shanahan scheme has the featured X receiver. This scheme does not have a featured quote unquote. It doesn't have a set template. It's based on what the quarterback feels the quarterback sees, what his favorite targets are, and also who the best players are. So it could be Kenyon Drake can merge